I'm Wendy K Laidlaw.
And I am the emotionologist.
Hey everyone, it's Wendy K Laidlaw here, and as always, I do hope that this podcast and video message finds you well. Now, I'm super excited today. We have a wonderful guest coming on here, and I've met him a couple of times, and after talking back and forth about various things and the way my business is evolving, I thought that you would really benefit from hearing what Dr. Bimbi Fernando, beg my pardon, has to share with us today. So, welcome, Bimbi.
Thank you, Wendy. Thanks for that introduction.
I
So,
want to give people a little bit of background about you before we start chatting because you've got a fascinating background and yeah, it's lovely your how we've come to meet and how we've um what your kind of what your focus and your vision is now. So Bimbi is a surgeon, associate professor, and a huge advocate for kindness, which we'll be talking about today. He's a consultant transplant surgeon and associate professor at University College London. He grew up in Northwest London as a son of a surgeon as well and a theatre nurse, and immigrated from Sri Lanka, which is amazing, obviously, that you went into that profession. But through that, he's witnessed the importance of community and hospitality from a very young age. He qualified as a doctor in 1990 from the Royal Free Hospital of Medicine, University of London, and pursued specialist surgical training across the UK, including Cambridge. Throughout his career, Dr. Fernando has been deeply involved in teaching medical students and training junior doctors. His work in transplantation, witnessing the profound gift of life through organ donation, ignited a deep-seated passion for his kindness, or for kindness indeed. This interest intensified during COVID times, during the pandemic, where he worked on the front lines in intensive care and observed the crucial role of compassion amidst this crisis. These experiences led him to explore kindness from a scientific, historical, and personal perspective, accumulating in his book, which has just come out, called The Forgotten Compass. Dr. Fernando believes kindness is a vital life skill essential for personal flourishing and building a better world. So wow, what an amazing intro there. How does it feel hearing that being relayed back?
well, my first podcast, so thank you, Wendy, for that. It is interesting. It's wonderful to hear it phrased by someone else, especially you, having met you a few times and knowing what you stand for. Yes, no, it's wonderful to be given the stage and talk about something that I'm passionate about, and just promoting the subjects of kindness.
Yeah.
The idea of the book is really just more or less a calling card for whatever the future holds for me. It's not really something that I want to be center part of everything. I just want it to be a calling card to more or less
Yeah.
just put down the marker that I am genuinely interested in this subject.
Yeah, and I think I bought your book and I read it. I read it over a week at night before I went to sleep because that's when I do most of my reading, I was really struck by it because it's lovely that you pulled out the phrase kindness, and we'll talk more. We've talked lots off camera, but perhaps you could share. We mentioned it in your intro, what it was about the pandemic, what it was about the kindness and compassionate nature of a large majority of the population in the UK coming together in
Yes.
that way that really struck you.
So my own sort of view in terms of the job I did prior to 2020 was doing transplant surgery and seeing wonderful gifts of a donor giving the gift of life to recipients. So
Yeah.
I used to work in kidney transplants, liver transplants, and would be performing these. And that was an amazing sight to see when you reanimate an organ and you see the impact of this. But then taking a step back, someone had donated those organs, and there was a bereaved family that was involved there making a very difficult decision. And sometimes when you are seeing it all the time, you don't actually recognize it, you don't appreciate it. It's something that you just don't notice. And it takes something else to perhaps shake your world.
Mm.
And nothing better than COVID-19 shook everyone's world,
Oh my goodness.
where I was based at the Royal Free when the pandemic broke.
Mm.
And essentially what had happened was we heard about this virus that was doing the rounds in China and maybe parts of Italy. and we heard that there may be a pandemic, and the Royal Free Hospital is one of the key centres for infectious diseases in England. And we then got a ping on my phone saying we've just accepted our first case of COVID-19, and at that point I thought, oh, it's real, it's hit home.
Yeah.
And we're used to dealing with other highly infectious diseases, but this felt somewhat different. And there's always that feeling that this is all, someone else's problem or happening somewhere else. But then what happened was one patient became a patient on ITU, which then became 2 patients, then 4 patients, then 8 patients, then 16 patients. It was a doubling. And our ITU, which was highly isolated initially, was 1 bed, but then very shortly, 1 ITU was shut down, then 2 ITUs were shut down, then 4 beds were shut down, 4 ITUs were shut down.
Right.
And we were sort of working in theatres, still doing our day-to-day job. And then one day I sort of saw members of the staff walking up and down, counting the number of ventilators in ITU, in the theatre space, and also counting the empty bed spaces. And the next day when I came in, all of those were full of patients. So the doubling really did have an impact. So our world was shook terribly, and we had to stop all forms of transplant surgery and indeed other surgery. And we had no rules as surgeons, but we wanted to help. That's what we were trained to do. And then we saw the amazing nurses, absolutely fantastic ITU nurses, really being the superheroes of the whole pandemic, keeping patients alive. Absolutely amazing. We were really running around trying to make their lives as easy as possible. So we began to see kindness between individuals where we didn't necessarily see kindness because we didn't look at it, and our eyes were opened in a different way. And then you may remember the clap for carers. So there's this wonderful yoga teacher by the name of Anne-Marie Plas from Holland, who thought she'd share this and bring it to the UK, where every Thursday night, the UK population would be invited to stand on their doorstep and appreciate the NHS staff. And the first impression we got was, many of my colleagues were thinking, we're doing all of this inside and all people are going to be doing is just clapping on their doorstep. What does that mean? How's that going to help? And then I distinctly remember the first Thursday when that happened. And, I was just indoors. I was at home that evening, and suddenly we heard, the rattling of tins and saucepans, and opened the door, and it was really loud, and went to the front of our house, and my daughters were at home, and, wife, we walked out onto the street and just saw the whole of the street out. And what happened in that single moment is I just felt something deep inside me that had been touched in an unimaginable way. And something was triggered that I thought, wow, how could something so intangible create such a positive impact? And it was a feeling that I wasn't aware of, that something so trivial or apparently trivial done on a mass scale could trigger that. And so that was a spark that just made me think, there is something here. I don't quite know what, and I don't quite know how to go about it. But, it probably triggered the journey to think, I need to look into this in more detail, and I need to find out more. And I went into hospital, and those same cynical people, were also trying to acknowledge, yes, this touched me in a different way, but I'm not going to say it too loudly. It's that sort of thing. Whereas others really threw themselves into it. So, so that triggered the mission of kindness.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing that, because even as you're recalling it, I can remember myself, the fear, the unknown, nobody really knew how it was going to, and I can imagine for you as a surgeon, you doing, I mean, it must have been devastating for you too, suddenly I hadn't even considered that, you know, when we were talking before, but obviously after reading your book, of course, all transplants had to stop because everything suddenly became infectious, you know, and yeah, everything had to stop on so many different levels. And that's a level that, you know, us out of the medical profession in that capacity wouldn't have even considered that, you know. But I do remember being a bit like you're like everyone else, thinking, what's a clap going to do to help these amazing people who are fighting? You know, their hospitals are just overrun. There's so many sick people, and you know, and like you, I sing the praises of the unsung heroes of nurses because they helped me many moons ago, and they didn't seem to get much recognition. But I do remember my son, he's a piper, so he got his bagpipes out and we went out the front. And I was trying to find the video for it actually so that I could share it with you. I can't find it at the moment, but I'll find it. Of him doing the bagpipes and everyone on the street coming out. We live in the south side of Edinburgh, and there's lots of tenement old buildings, and everyone's out their windows clapping, and he's playing the
Wonderful.
bagpipes. And like yourself, it was really touching, wasn't it? And when you say you were touched by it, where in your body, where were you touched by it?
Yeah, so I think this was the thing. I couldn't say it, I couldn't describe it, but I could feel it. And it was a deep feeling inside of something emotional that I wouldn't have expected to trigger, you know, and over the years, you know, I've been moved by, you know, Lassie movies in the past or
Me too. I used to love Lassie.
or you know, I'm a Chelsea fan, and when Chelsea won certain competitions, you know, you'd be moved in a different way. But this was something that just touched you deep in a deep place, and you felt it, and you realized that this was significant, and there was you know, a collective effervescence, if you want to use that term, you know, where everyone together was able to uplift and almost draw a deeper emotion across the board.
Yeah.
And the healthcare workers really did benefit from you know, these levels of appreciation. You know, I can say that. I know that, really. So
Yeah. Well, it's lovely to hear from you being in that environment at the time, and that the other healthcare professionals benefited from it. Because I think us out in the street were like, will they really? And of course there was news and there was videos and things, but you're kind of like, well, will it help? But I guess that appreciation, that show, that demonstration, you know, of it goes back to babies cry for it, grown men die for it, recognition. You know, it's really kind of public recognition, and for people that probably thought, does anybody know? Does anybody care? And in our cultures, our Western cultures, you know, sometimes a lot of that connectedness and community is fragmented and separated, and then people feel isolated and alone, don't they? So I'm so pleased that really touched you.
it did, and as you said, you know, the key word I picked out there, which is something that is important, is connection or connectedness. And you know, that has become a theme, which is a consistent theme through kindness, you know, and what kindness gives you the opportunity to do or have. And it's probably, you know, if you want to look at it in a wider setting, you know, we're all connected to each other in one way or another, you know, whether it's 6 degrees of separation from anyone in the world, or whether it's something else, you know, whether it's the internet, or we are all connected to each other. But something about kindness and the emotional connection that it can draw, and you know, I just found that is really positive and wonderful. And what is interesting is my take is a scientist, you know, I'm a scientist, I'm a surgeon, and I come from a school of people that really want to critique the evidence. And, you know, we talk about systematic reviews, meta-analysis, randomized controlled trials, levels of evidence, you know, basically using all these complex words to describe, you know, this is correct, this is incorrect, or you've got no proof of that, therefore we can't accept it. Yet it's opened my eyes up to think, no, you don't need to have evidence when it's that. And, you know,
when you feel it, you feel it in your body, and it's, and I think our cultures are so fast moving and thrusting and pursuing and better, faster, more, now, yesterday. that what you've described there, which of course we're all kind of conditioned to, is it right? Is it wrong? Where's the evidence? All that kind of stuff. And you're talking about the emotional component, which is what I, with my audience, realized over 10 years of working is actually the core of from a
Yes.
cellular. I'm sure you'll have lots of juicy, exciting science to back up what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But we are literally energetic beings, we are molecules of emotion, and
Mm.
and how these things can really move you. You think what emotion is, emotion. So it's lovely from your background for you to have felt that, which is
Yes.
almost indescribable. How do you tangibly hold on to that or put it under a microscope, or do you know what I mean? It's an intangible. So there's parts of us kind of go, but so how has that been for you? I mean, obviously it started you on a lovely journey just to kind of like
Yes.
put a stake in the sand and say, yeah, this did something to me. But how has
Yes.
that kind of manifested itself for you?
So the way in which I've approached it and the way it's manifested itself for me is the thing, there is something here. We know there's something here.
Mm,
I'm going to go on a journey to try and find as much evidence to
mm,
prove the benefits of kindness.
yeah.
But you know what? If I don't, it doesn't matter.
Mm.
You just
Something
have,
moved me and I want to explore it further
yes,
type thing. Yeah.
exactly. And there's the cynic chimp on one shoulder that might be saying something
Yeah.
along the lines of, well, you need to do a randomized controlled double-blind trial. And, the person on the other side is saying, well, hang on, jumping out of an aeroplane with a parachute, no one ever did a randomized controlled trial to see if that is safe or not. People just do
Yeah.
it because it's the right thing to do and they
Yeah.
understand.
So
And
the other person that's saying that, what does that feel like for you? What image do you have for that? Because you've got the chimp on one side, but what is that other image?
so yes, well, the chimp is slightly cynically put because of I know there's
Paradox. Yeah.
the chimp paradox and Steve Peters
Yeah.
and talking about the limbic system and how you can jump to conclusions. There's very
Absolutely.
much the rational brain where you process everything.
Which is why I'm asking, what is this on the left?
So
Because visually,
probably if you can imagine, it's an old man with glasses who
right.
may be an old consultant who used to train me. It could be someone like that, stating
Uh-huh.
that you've got to provide the evidence, otherwise we're not changing, and we're going to
Yeah.
stick with what we're doing, with that. And it's almost like I'm going to that person saying, what about this? And so in some ways, that person may represent the scientific community, the hard-nosed scientific community, people who want to scrutinize PhDs and doctorate theses and say yes or pass this as a peer-reviewed publication, so it'll be suitable for publication. I've spent my time doing that as well, going
Yeah.
through those different persuading that. But I also realize you don't need science for kindness, but it's
No.
good, but you don't need it really. So
Yeah. And what does kindness mean for you?
so so for me, it's doing something of service to another person or people with feeling. So it has to have an added emotion, an
Mm,
emotional investment in you performing whatever it is.
yeah.
So whether it's opening a door, perhaps with a smile and with, I really hope you have a good day today as I open this door for you. So it's
Yeah.
conveying something else rather than a transactional open the door, closing the door,
Yeah.
and it's finding a way of connecting with others, and it's finding a way of making others feel that they are valued and they are important,
Yeah.
and without necessarily saying it. So whether it's through listening, attention, care, concern, it's making sure that people aren't invisible. So that is kindness. I try and define it in one of the chapters. And that's a challenge. There's an umbrella of
Uh-huh.
different terms to define kindness. So
Yeah.
in the end, I try and capture its essence, and then we're relying on the different parts of the brain, the feeling parts of the brain, that captures this, where words, the rational part of the brain, can't really describe it. Really, it's. I know you love your arts. It's like drawing a picture and coloring in different parts, but trying to
Yeah.
describe that to someone who is blind is a challenge. And
Yeah.
one quote which I love is from Mark Twain. Kindness is the language that the blind can see and the deaf
Mm.
can hear.
Yeah. And and I can really feel on this stage of your journey that it obviously it's lovely how you've shared how it really touched you, the clapping and things, but equally from your book, your mom and your dad witnessed that in action. You're saying about opening a door and but it's almost like an awareness of other people, isn't it? Like,
Mm.
and I'll talk about other elements in a minute, but I love that because there's nothing nicer than engaging in eye contact. And obviously you're in London and I'm in Edinburgh normally, but there's whether it's the climate or the culture, I don't know. It's rare to have people give you eye contact and open a door and give you a smile. So it's certainly something that needs to be taught to certain elements of personalities, and that I'll come into that in a bit more in a minute. But as I say, it was lovely reading in your book how welcomed your family were when they first came to the UK, and
Yes.
and the acts of kindness were really rare. And was that because they'd come into other Sri Lankans, or was that just
Yes. I mean, I think kindness in the community is really important. So my mother and dad, my mum and dad came over to the UK a few years before I was born. They came with my two older brothers, and my father was really sort of dependent on acts of kindness. I think he arrived with £60 apparently at that point,
yes,
and my mum and two brothers followed on the boat afterwards.
mm,
And they were sort of describing how they were trying to make ends meet. In all honesty, the story goes, although it might have been coloured in over the years, was that they couldn't afford meat, for example. So, it was really sort of just being careful with what they chose to eat.
yeah,
And we're introduced to people from the Sri Lankan community, and slowly we got to know them. This is before me.
mm,
But as part of that, they insisted on being called uncles and aunties, and that may be a Sri Lankan cultural thing with
yeah,
elders. And as far as my brothers were concerned, and they were well and truly looked after,
mm,
made to feel welcome. And also, come and eat this food. We've got this great food. And so it was sharing, and it's a celebration of everyone being there together,
mm,
but trying to do the best you can for each other. And it's wonderful that those relationships have lasted, and those acts of kindness really benefited um, ourselves as a family, but
yeah.
perhaps stimulated us to, and I'm not sure whether this is the case, because I've heard some wonderful acts of kindness from my grandfather back in Sri Lanka before he died. But it's stimulated my parents to really be welcoming for other people who may be
Of
alone
course.
in the
Yeah.
UK, especially around Christmas time. I
Yeah.
think that was fun. So Christmas would be for families. Our families would be particularly big around Christmas time. It'd be great just seeing a whole load of people who'd probably only see once a year on Christmas,
Yeah.
but coming out of the woodwork from the hospital. My dad would almost go around the hospital and bring them home.
Oh,
And I'd see
bless.
my mum frantically wrapping presents, new presents to give them. And I'd sort of recognize some of these presents coming out and being opened as ones which I'd opened earlier in the day. So
Yeah, upcycle the presents to someone else.
yeah, upcycling before its time, that was
Yeah,
that. So yes.
exactly. Well, I think it's lovely that that element of Sri Lankan culture has come here, and that has been ignited in you to, I mean, you've always had that, but that you're talking about it now, because I think it
Mm,
really, I'm sure as some people are listening, kind of feeling an ache in their heart because there just is so much isolation and separation
yes.
for a lot of people, especially my audience. They've had to fight against all sorts of things. And a lot of people don't perhaps have safe families or safe people in which to turn to, or say even safe aunts and uncles or communities. So
Yes.
it's lovely to hear that still exists. And do you find that is still kind of prevalent in your life, in your everyday now, or?
Yeah, so perhaps less so. Certainly whenever I go to my mum's, I mean, my daughters find it hilarious that they can never leave my parents' home without being fed or given a gift of some sort, no matter what. My mum just goes off and finds something to give them. And there's often other people there, and who we don't know. And my father turned 90, bless him, last October. And he didn't want a fuss made, didn't want a birthday party, no one there. And we sort of went there, and again, we were just expecting it would just be a few family members, and we got there and there was a few more people. My mum had invited other people, and it turned out that we didn't know some of the people, and it's only later that we discovered this is a friend of the hairdresser who looked after my dad at one point, and it was just quite funny, that there was a real tenuous link, but still embraced the family life. So yes, it does happen,
Yeah.
and maybe that might be slightly lost with the generations, and maybe my generation and my daughter's generation might not be as welcoming to so many other people, and that's something which I'd love to change, and have that ability to feel that you can welcome people across the board, really. So
Yeah, well, I think it's probably going to go full cycle again anyway. There's so many people. I mean, there's so many stats and figures about, depression and, antidepressants, suicides. It's on the rise because as human beings, you talked about the emotion connection to kindness. It's just one of life's basic things. But if you're stuck indoors, and of course, COVID pushed everybody indoors, and I think it definitely changed. Up in Scotland, we were like 2 years affected
yeah.
by it, and it really changed the essence and the engagement and people's habits and things as well. So I hope that by having these kind of conversations, it just makes people think again. Like it's almost like everyone was pushed indoors because of the pandemic, and now everyone can kind of come out, and when they are engaging, start to think. So it sounds like you're continuing a legacy, that might have been short-circuited by COVID, but also ignited by COVID.
Yes. No, definitely it has been ignited by, and another thing which I'm learning about, so I'm by no means an expert, but is practicing gratitude. And
Yeah.
actually, when you have setbacks that affect you, it's important to actually think about the positives wherever. And I'm trying to reframe certain aspects of COVID, which was a very dark time for so many of us, to try and find some of the positives that has come out of it in terms of trying to establish that. And and in many ways that's important, to move on.
And your book is one of them, isn't it? I mean, there's a lovely saying, as a Buddhist monk had said, when you take a seed and you put it into the ground, A, it has to want to stop being a seed, and then two, it's in its darkest place before it then goes further down with its roots before it comes up through the soil. And whether it's healing or whether it's the universe or whatever you want to call it, kind of forcing. There's another great saying I love, which is our ego wants us to stay stuck in a velvet rut, but our soul is always wanting us to grow. And then there's that kind of, sometimes it's forced growth. So you're right. So, we look back at those times and go, it was dark, it was miserable, but what did I learn from it, and how did I grow from it? And and I guess that's self-kindness,
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's whilst it's lovely to be kind to people that deserve it and are, in day-to-day interactions, it comes back to that self-kindness of going, you did the best you could with the times that you had and the information that you had. And because that's important too, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And that obviously reminds me of the importance of practicing self-kindness and learning from these things and embracing imperfections. The kintsugi pot, the steeped in Japanese culture, which is, if you have a ceramic pot, if it's broken, you don't just throw the pot away. What you do is you find all the pieces, you carefully stick them together, and you paint them and bond them together with gold. You embrace the imperfections and you create something that's more beautiful. And building something like that from anything that's broken is wonderful. And it just is important to embrace imperfections, to realize that things do happen, bad things happen, but they may be there to test us, maybe there to challenge us. But if you're able to look after yourself and find ways of putting yourself together, and forgiving yourself if you are too hard on yourself, of course that will help.
Yeah, and I think it's lovely that you say that. And of course, that my audience, my listeners are probably, there are various stages of healing. So, it's I always try to remain positive. If this body can come back from all that it went through and regenerate and repair, which is what the body always wants to do, then of course everyone can. And of course, part of that journey is that emotional healing as well, because whatever has set up the body to be in an inflamed state, or not to self-regenerate, we have to look at the emotional component. And this kind of leads me on a little bit to the other side of the happiness question, which is, a lot of my audience are hugely big-hearted, hugely connected, love opening doors, love gifting and giving, and in fact part of their learning is to learn to come back into balance, and do that 180 degree to start with, to heal themselves before then finding that middle ground, because there are a lot of selfish, toxic, thrusting, manipulative, unfortunately, personalities out there in the world. That's just a fact. There's the what do they call them? There's the community-based people, the partnership model, and then there's the domineering dictatorship model of, and how have you navigated that?
So medicine has all kinds, and
I can imagine.
yes, it could be argued that look, let me just start off by, in my opinion, everyone that goes into medicine goes in with a heart and an intention to help other people.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen anything different, in all of my years. There may be exceptions, but I haven't seen it myself. Then what happens through your medical training and your medical career is you get influenced by senior people. I think I mentioned jokingly the chimp on my left shoulder, who you have to justify things to. But you also, in different specialties, get put into different silos, and medicine sort of trains you to want to come up with the right answers and to help people with the right answers and given the medication, given the treatment, making it work. Now, if it doesn't work, people deal with that in a different way. They may see it as there's something wrong with me because I haven't been able to do this. I haven't been able to persuade the person to have the treatment, or I haven't been able to persuade them to take the medication, or they haven't had enough trust in me. I failed them. Or they might do something which is unkind, which could be to blame the patient and isolate the patient. And if you have the wrong silos sticking together, that may perpetuate that sense of feeling. And, that's not the kind thing to do. But it does happen. And every specialty would have an area which is something where our medical treatment and our surgical treatment can't necessarily have all the answers, doesn't have all the answers to manage those individuals. But there's other things that you can do to support them. And when we get to the end of what we can offer, we're just really bad at linking up with this. And this may be back to that science versus what's right from the heart. And I think medicine probably needs to change to really provide that holistic approach
Well, I think you're this pioneer in that, because you know what? I think what you're saying is spot on, and I know women that are listening to this have probably been through the medical field,
Mm,
and actually the people that have impacted me the most, and there were some brilliant people that I met along the way. There were some real horrors that I met on the way. Um, but it was the people that had actually veered off the mainstream general medical field, that actually became so suffocated and frustrated with the confines, because of course they've got to abide by these certain rules and science and everything, General Medical
mm,
Council, etc. If they don't, they could get sued and all
mm.
sorts of things. But it was the doctors that kind of veered off and became really explorative and expansive. They were deeply inspiring to me. In fact, Dr. Tony Coop is one who he's very dear to my heart, and he was 40 years in the medical field, and he started to go into kind of like, so why is like one of four sisters got endometriosis, and why is this, and started to kind of really gone through all the different areas of the medical field. So it's fascinating. It's great that you're questioning all of this. So, but how did
Mm.
you handle those that perhaps weren't so kind? Because I mean, I think it's kind of well known in the medical field, the how many years of training you have to do, and then the abuse you get, and the long
Yeah.
hours, and the debt that you take on, and all that kind of stuff. How did you manage? How did you deal with the maybe not so nice?
So, so I suppose, I mean, the important part is to be authentic, be yourself, not to be anyone different. And if someone treats you badly, that doesn't give you permission to treat someone else badly. But
Absolutely.
what it does do is it allows you to reframe how they've treated you
Mm,
as a way of they're trying to improve what you're doing for the patients and also to try and make you a better doctor.
yeah.
So that is how I coped with the direct sort of challenge to how I would do something.
Mm.
And the way I would take that on with my trainees is to try and do it with kindness at every stage.
Well, they must
But
have loved you.
well, there is always that challenge that if you're too kind,
Mm,
you may be seen as a soft touch, and I think in our conversations previously, I think kindness and sensitivity is a sort of superpower, isn't it, really?
that's it.
If you're authentic and if you have the right intentions, you can win people over in the hardest sort of situations. But you can also be kind but firm,
Exactly.
and you could, so that's where you do something with meaning. Trying to get a child to ride a bike, for example, you could either be really kind because you don't want them to fall over and
Uh-huh.
graze their knee, cut open their knee. We were joking
Yeah.
about this earlier about
Yes.
someone
That was
cutting their
me
knee.
earlier, folks, when I fell off my bike.
Yes, but it's not going to do them any favors if they're on the stabilizers for the rest of their life. You wouldn't have fallen off your bike in on holiday, would you? But
Oh, exactly. But it's a really valid point, isn't it? It's like when you've got children yourself or you're engaging with people, it's that balance. That's why I talk about the secret to life is balance. The secret to
mm,
balance is awareness. The secret to awareness is journaling and meditation, because it allows you that kind of observer person part to kind of go, okay, where's the balance here? If I'm being too kind and this person's taking advantage or whatever, then I need to kind of pull back a bit. And I think that's, again, as my business has evolved, I touched on earlier off camera, was its super sensitive secret strength.
mm,
And I think that's not taught, and again, as you're saying with your students, if they think you're a soft touch, then they'll push too far, or they might not do what they need to do, or the kid might not get on the bike. It's that firm but fair kind of,
yes.
that's how I used to say to myself with my children. It's like firm
Mm,
but fair. There's a real clear, and learning assertiveness rather than aggression, and learning kind of about yourself so you can show up authentically, because a lot of people aren't taught or don't know who they are. They
yes.
just model themselves on some, what's, and nowadays, I mean, I would hate to be a young person on social media. There's so many different influences bombarding them. But do you think having your dad, because of course your dad was a surgeon too, did he impart any wisdom that allowed you to kind of protect yourself in any way?
Not really. I suppose in all honesty, there was perhaps the race element. with my father coming from Sri Lanka, and at that point, all hospital doctors in consultant positions were Caucasian, were white, and so he had to go through the process to be appointed to his role at the Royal Free Hospital, and so that was hard for him. So he learnt that
Yeah,
process,
that
and
would
when
have
he
been
was
really hard back then because, oh
Mm.
my goodness, the racist element was rife, I think, especially in Britain.
Yes, so definitely, he achieved, and very proud of him to do that.
Mm.
What is nice is nearly everyone I meet who worked with him recognize how kind he was. So there is
Mm.
that nature and nurture sort of element,
Yeah,
and if you can't choose your parents, but if I did, I would have chosen someone very similar, or those particular parents. I'm blessed to say that, really lucky. And it's wonderful because coming through the system, you'd know he had such a positive influence on so many other people that
Mm.
was beneficial. In terms of his influence on me, um, a quick sideline, but a story, as to why I chose transplant. I wanted to do surgery, but I
Yeah,
wasn't too sure on doing transplant surgery because I hardly ever saw him growing up, because he was a standalone consultant surgeon doing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year for
yeah,
many, many years. And so my memories of him at crucial times in my life was quite limited in terms of him sort of being present at school events and other things,
yeah.
because he was always working.
And that's
So,
hard as a young boy, isn't it? To not have your dad
hmm.
there. Yeah.
But you recognized also that he was doing some great stuff. You'd bump into the patients and you'd sort of meet different people. And so you'd have that balance and you'd recognize the two. But when I was choosing my career, so I'd already done the early stages of surgery, but I had to choose my specialty. It happened to coincide. I'd have a meeting um, on the Wednesday, but on the Tuesday there was a Festschrift, a celebration of my father's work as he retired. And I
Mm.
was going to go down to London from Cambridge, and I was going to just go in there and sort of join for some of the festivities that happened. And I got home to my parents, and I'd just been in two all-day clinics. It's the colorectal clinic, the bowel clinic, and I was quite exhausted. I'd driven all the way down, and came to my parents' dining table, sort of saw what was there, and there's this note saying, "Oh, dad's, we're off at the hospital, in this particular part of the hospital, where a few of the patients had come to say goodbye to him. Do come along." And I sort of felt exhausted. I thought, no, I'm not sure if I want to do that. And
Yeah.
I went along, knowing that my brother, who'd just flown in from America, was going to be there as well. And
Yeah.
we arrived in this part of the hospital, this big room in the hospital, and it was jam-packed with old patients of his.
Nice.
And it was quite entertaining. My brother and myself, I sort of gave him a hug as we met, and saw my dad just sort of finishing his speech. And then there was almost like a wedding reception queue, where my brother and myself would just happen to be in the queue, and people were walking past us on the way to meet my dad.
Mm.
And the conversation was very much like a royal reception. So what do you do? It was more, when did my dad transplant you? It was that sort of conversation.
Yes.
And that was wonderful. And talking to all these people, and as they're moving along, then there's this nice man who I remember clearly, who was standing there. And Chris asked him, "So when did my dad transplant you?" And he said, "He didn't transplant me, he transplanted my wife." I said, "Oh, where is she?" He said, "Oh, she died 5 years ago. But he transplanted her 10 years ago. And
Oh.
those 5 years were the best years of our life together."
Mm.
And something again just went inside me, and I thought, hmm. And then the next day, when I had to go in and declare my interest, I said, "I'm going to do transplant." And the person was writing down, hovering over the colorectal box, and he sort of stopped and looked up at me, and then went over, sort of frowning as he wrote transplant. So I remember that impact, and that was the story, you know, and so, and you know, I haven't regretted that, of course. So
So what you're saying is secretly, not even secretly, you have a big heart and you were moved by the fact that this man was still, and it's not just doing the work, is it? It's meeting the people. I'm hearing from you too. It's not
yes.
just a body on a bed. And I have to say my experiences with some people where you were just a number, you were just a body in a bed to be flown through. And it sounds like going into that speciality, it was really connecting with people. Like there's this.
Oh no, absolutely, absolutely. There's absolutely no doubt. I mean, transplantation is wonderful for that opportunity. The fact that you can get to meet
Well, it's
people.
really meaningful, isn't it? It adds that extra element. It's not just that it's not like you don't have the skills for the things, but there's something really deeply connecting and meaningful for that.
Yes, no, there's no doubt about it. And to me, partly because of what I was exposed to previously and knowing the great cohort of patients that my father had treated and transplanted, to
Yeah.
me, sort of seeing that and continuing that was fabulous. And you know, he started this tradition where if one of the transplant patients became pregnant, he would go in at the time of their cesarean section if they were having a cesarean section and be there so that he
Oh,
could put his hand over his baby, which is the kidney, and
wow.
they would perform the incision and take the baby out through a cesarean route, and that was a tradition that he started, you know,
Lovely.
and you know, it's been wonderful to be part of that and to do that and you know, to feel really involved with family members when I've done that very same thing as well. So
Have you done that as well? Have you?
yes, I know, it is wonderful to do. You know, first of all, amazing to be at any birth.
Yes.
But you know, those ones where you know that they were having trouble conceiving before and then had a successful transplant and then going on to have this, you know, it really is joyous and you know, just incredible to be part of that. And
Oh, that's lovely. That just is so nice. And again, we need to hear more stories like that because it really moves you, it really connects you, gives you goosebumps down your arms. It's like, I think as we've evolved and grown as cultures in the West, there's just so much lack of stories like that, connectedness like that
yes.
can make a difference between somebody, carrying on with their life or not. By hearing these stories, they're so inspiring. And no wonder I can see the same for you when you retire, having a room full of people then.
Yes, yeah, you know, that's yeah, that might be sooner than you think, you know, in terms of retirement, because what's happened with the whole kindness mission is it's set me on a slightly different path, I think, now, because I've perhaps got some hairy, audacious goals which I'd like to pursue, but
Yep.
probably I'm thinking more towards helping support people and individuals find a
Mm.
purposeful retirement. You know, that's something which you know, I'll be looking to do as the next project. And kindness will be part of that because a purposeful retirement would really need some means of serving others, and
Yeah.
kindness allows that to happen in best bets. And from my point of view, for a purposeful retirement, you know, I'm inspired by someone called Vishen Lakhani of Minds Valley,
Yeah.
and he talks about different areas, you know. So for you to have a purposeful retirement, you need to have your health, so your health set, your mind, your mindset, so mentally and physically well.
Yeah.
But then the two others which we don't talk about would be your your heart set, which is
Yeah.
all the emotional aspects,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking of the fourth one: heart set, mindset, health set,
Probably
soul
spiritual.
soul set.
Yeah,
The
spiritual.
soul set is your spiritual things. What is deep
And, and,
resonating
and it's lovely hearing you talk that because I was just saying to my children the other night, like, yeah, I'm having to follow my heart now. In my heart is art, like heart. And then of course I'm the emotional thing and it's really important to me to help people connect to their emotions, embrace their emotions, understand, especially those of us that are what we would class as super sensitive. It's
Yes.
been referred to as people view that as weakness or the culture doesn't celebrate sensitivity in all its forms and
Mm.
understanding what the superpower is, but also saying to my kids the other night, I can feel that, I'm on this other spiritual journey, like that it's pulling me. The soul, the spirit is just like, no, we're having to
Yeah.
follow our heart now because
Mm.
and it's, oh my goodness, it's challenging because I'm having to, navigate, like you were saying earlier, the chimp on the shoulder, the kind of the dutiful, the deontology of duties and responsibilities because, oh, I was, a good girl growing up and did what I was supposed to do and all that kind of stuff. And now I'm just like, oh my goodness, when you lay down the armory that you've built up over the decades and kind of go, but doing so in a way, like we were saying with kindness, doing so in a way that allows for self-protection. So you can, because what tends to happen, a lot of people just switch off, numb out, shove
Mm.
everything down, put on an armory and retract.
Mm.
And that is misery, and hearing you talk about connectedness and community, but how do we do that in a way that we're still being kind to ourselves so that we have enough energy and vitality to share that and be kind to others, because
Yeah.
that's what it's all about. So what does the future, I hear that you're looking at, obviously you're looking at helping people retire because that's kind of where you're at yourself, but what does the future, what's your vision and your future hold for you?
Yeah, so really, this kindness has set me on a different path. My interest in kindness. My hairy, audacious goal, which I'll declare, would be to find a way of building an institute of kindness. Okay,
Mm,
and by that, there may be other things that may be similar, but I was inspired as part of the research for this to go to Copenhagen and look at the Institute of Happiness.
yeah.
And that really sort of made me think we need an institute of kindness here. We
Wow.
need something that can help support government policy, corporations on the global scale, be able to satisfy the professor on my left shoulder, and
Yeah.
also what I really want to be doing with the chimp on my other side, saying, you've got to pay and immerse yourself in kindness, so providing evidence, providing stuff that can persuade the naysayers to almost weave in kindness into everything we do and have it in public policy documents and have it so that if we're going to implement anything, it'll be good for someone to say, what is the kindness impact here? How can we improve the kindness impact? And without trying to overthink it, I
Mm,
want to incorporate it so that we do that, but weave it perhaps most usefully for individuals to say, how can I improve my life through
uh-huh.
kindness? How can I be kind to myself? We've
Yeah.
talked about self-kindness and, meditation we've touched upon. Looking after yourself. This is very much part of putting on your own oxygen mask before
Right.
securing that of the people around you, young child.
Yeah.
And it would be good to have some sort of central resource for this,
Mm.
um, so that it's obviously available for people to use and to guide them as to what they want to do. So that's my hairy, audacious goal. Um, you know,
I love it. I think when we spoke before and you said, that if, as you say, policies or things were coming through or whatever, that you're able to put that slant on it. Like with as we come full circle to the clapping for the community clapping, how something so simple, and people felt were quite cynical about, actually got into the heart, got through the armory into the heart and actually moved people,
mm,
and
mm,
shifted people's perspective. Perhaps the cynic, perhaps the, oh, nobody cares anymore. And actually, it melted people. So it's lovely that that is your wonderful, audacious goal. I think it's a great goal to have. And if people want to learn more about you, obviously the Forgotten Compass book is now out in print paperback on Amazon. Um,
yes.
awesome. Awesome. What did that feel like getting I know you self-published like myself. So what did that feel like?
Yeah, I tell you, it is quite fun. From going from a Word document to a PDF document to suddenly seeing it in this and having a box of
Yeah.
books arrive, that is,
Yeah.
that is wonderful. I'll tell you something that I have loved is passing it on to people who you haven't
Yeah.
told them anything about writing a book.
Uh-huh.
And, one of the amazing things that I've discovered is um, the responses of people, and if they've been acknowledged. So I have a coach who has helped me through some challenging times during my career,
Yeah.
and she talked to me first about the kintsugi pot,
Yeah.
and and I sort of mentioned that, and I had lunch with her, handed her the book. She didn't know anything about it, and you could see her almost welling up with
Oh,
emotion
she'd be so proud of you
of
for
of seeing that. And
yeah.
she just said, and I said, this isn't from me, this is from all the other people you've helped as well. They may not be able to put it in words, but here is something for all of us.
Oh,
So
well, that was the ultimate of kindness, Bimbi. That was lovely. That's really nice. I
yeah.
always refer to my books as like book babies. It's like, you have this idea,
Mm,
impregnation, and then you have to produce it, and then you have to give birth to it. And then, oh my goodness, it's like, it is a lot of work, love, effort,
yeah,
energy, and tears sometimes in
yeah.
producing it, but it's so worth it. And what a lovely way to give back. No wonder she was crying with joy and cried.
Yes. Yeah, no, that is lovely, and of course, you obviously then think, okay, who did I not thank? Who I should have thanked, and then that's another matter. I suppose you just have to write some more books, wouldn't you? Really?
Exactly. But I love that you brought up gratitude earlier, and I'm a great one of thankfulness, and you're saying who else should I have thanked, because I think I make a conscious effort to thank people where it's needed. The person that looks forlorn and down, and is, but still managing to force smile, to say thank you, and noticing people, because I think that makes all the difference. So
Yeah,
maybe the pair of us are in our own little ways, doing our own little things to try and make the
absolutely.
world a better place.
Yes.
And also to pull out those that are doing great work, and on those that are super sensitive, and those that are doing the very best what they can with their environment and their bodies, and the situation that they have.
There are lots of people there who really want to bring kindness to the forefront, and perhaps don't know how exactly, and don't know how to challenge, and don't know how to be assertive yet remain
And
super
that's
sensitive.
where online, that's where again I'm working on that at the moment, to help trying to help people with, because I think people think assertion is aggression. It's not. It's
Mm,
what we talked about, with the bike, the child, the firm but fair, how to protect oneself, to
mm,
let stuff in. As I say, that's why my new logo is a shield with four squares. Two are open and two are closed. To know what to let in, the
mm,
kindness and the
mm,
thankfulness and the beauty and the art and the love and the colors and all that stuff, and how to protect oneself from the toxic, the not so nice, etc. And
mm.
that's obviously not set in stone either. That is, we learn as we get older. What worked 10 years ago doesn't work now, because we've evolved, we've grown, our soul and our spirit wants us to keep growing. So what would be your parting words to people as they're listening to this, apart from to obviously get your book?
Yep. Um, practice self-kindness is the first thing. So look after yourself before looking after other people. And that isn't a selfish thing at all. That's really, really important. So I want to say that first, but probably the parting thing I would leave you with would be, wherever there is another human being, there is an opportunity for kindness and to practice kindness. And you get one chance to do it as you go by. You can't sort of leave that and then go back and say, oh, well, I'm meant to be kind then. So
Mm.
why not embrace every opportunity as you can? And with one kind act at a time, you'll make the world a better place.
That's beautiful. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute joy to chat with you further and get to know you more. And I know
Yeah,
that we
thank
will
you.
be engaging again, and I'll have you back on at various points so we can see where you're at on your journey. But thank you so much, Bimbi.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for inviting me. I've really enjoyed this, and it's my first podcast, so thank you.
Well, look, I'm going to press pause and record, and we're just going to chat further in a minute. But thank you so much, Bimbi.
Thank you now.
So, until next time, trust your soul, follow your heart, and let your instincts play their part.